Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mary Liz McCurdy, Senior Vice President of Business Development and Partnerships. We've all been impacted over the last few years on the devastating impacts and consequences of climate change. In this forum, we'll explore the effectiveness of climate legislation with some of the world's greatest thinkers, policymakers, and founders. We'll explore partnerships and solutions and wrestle with solutions to ameliorate this urgent crisis at hand. Before we begin, I want to thank our underwriter, Southern Company, for their support of Atlantic's journalism. Now, please silence your phone and simultaneously keep it out and share your highlights on using the hashtag TAF23. Now, let's begin this afternoon's conversation.
For a conversation about taking the lead in an energy transition for all, please welcome Newell, founder of Block Power, and Jonathan Elkind, senior researcher at Columbia University's Center for Global Energy. Here to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's executive producer of audio, Claudine Abad.
Welcome, everyone, and welcome, Jonathan and Newell. I'm very excited to have this very important conversation. Jonathan, I'm going to just jump in and start with you. Let's start with the Inflation Reduction Act. It's 1 year later. I'd like to know what you think the global implications are here and what we could learn from what other countries are doing to race towards clean energy.
Part of the global implications of the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, are clearly that after so many years when the world was waiting for policymaking and legislating from the United States, finally this really important law was put in place. And it interacts in a very important way with the CHIPS and Science Act that immediately preceded it, and with the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that came about a little bit less than a year before. So it's huge, the totality of it, because it reaches in so many different directions. It's also just important symbolically that the U.S., which has historically been the source of the vast share of global emissions, put in place laws that are ambitious and far-reaching. So that's one thing. In terms of implications around the globe, it's pluses and minuses. Over time, the implementation of a lot of the technologies in the U.S. market is expected to have the effect of driving down the costs of lots of the different technologies, whether one is talking about electric vehicles or heat pumps or electrolysis for clean hydrogen, what have you.
Briefly on lessons from others. The government of India has, through the last couple of decades, really done amazing things in terms of helping to accelerate the uptake of high-efficiency lighting. How did they do it? First of all, they collaborated with others, including the U.S., on standard setting for light-emitting diodes, those really high-efficiency lights that we have now in many places. But the part that they did with a sense of mastery was advance purchase commitments. The government said, we'll buy X 100,000 high-efficiency lamps that then they would put into different institutions. By doing that, progressively, the costs went down, 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 because they were buying in bulk, because producers knew that they were going to have a big market, and because it was an opportunity that they were very happy to tap into. So that's a good example of something that's been done effectively elsewhere, and now more and more, those kinds of approaches are being used in the U.S. market as well.
Newell, I think of light bulbs and buildings, and I think of buildings and you. You say that your company, Block Power, turns buildings into Teslas. I would love for you to tell me what that means to you, and also how will or has the IRA impacted your specific projects?
Well, when we talk about turning buildings into Teslas, we're referring to the opportunity that we now have all of the hardware that we need to totally decarbonize existing buildings. And just like Tesla and the entire EV industry has removed fossil fuel engines from functioning vehicles and made them all electric with smart, modern, all electric engines, we now can run our buildings that way. So instead of burning oil or gas or wood or propane, we can use electricity from clean energy sources to provide for our heating, for our hot water, for our cooking, for our air conditioning, and have our buildings be electrified. And that's not like a futuristic thing. We have all the technology that we need to do that now. You just mentioned heat pumps. Heat pumps are one of the major ways, technologies that allow us to do this. And so, we talk about turning buildings into Teslas to help folks understand what's possible now. In terms of the IRA, for our industry, it's going to start rolling out in the next 60 days. The states have had to submit their plans to the U.S. Department of Energy as to how they're going to invest billions and billions of dollars in their state. There's $8.8 billion in particular to go towards electrifying buildings and lowering emissions in buildings. 40% of that has to be invested in buildings in communities that are financially underserved. So you take the U.S. Department of Energy, which really was set up to regulate nuclear energy and large oil and gas projects, and now they have a ton of money. And 40% of that money, not only does the money have to go out to the states, and it's much more money than they're used to having, but 40% of that money must go out to clean energy projects in low and moderate income communities that are financially underserved. It's a pretty significant challenge, but what an incredible opportunity for those of us who care about not only climate, but also wealth inequality. It's a massive opportunity to do reparative investments in clean energy infrastructure. And we think that clean energy infrastructure should be owned and operated by low and moderate income communities. And so not only would they be trained to do the jobs, but they should have an ownership stake in the clean energy projects that occur in their communities under the IRA. So we're starting to see all of that roll out now.
If I could stay with you for just one moment more on this topic, I'm interested to hear about, I think when I think of vulnerable communities who are most at risk and could bear the brunt of climate change and already are, I also think they have a lot of things to juggle that are complicated in their everyday life and difficult. And so I wonder, Donnell, what's your pitch to address climate change among the competing list of priorities in their life? How do you sell the need for those energy upgrades?
Well, we try to position the energy upgrades so that they sell themselves. We try to. A lot of folks don't realize that it's the affluent buildings like the one we're in, or there are buildings here, lots of glass. They're expensive to heat and cool. You might have some heated pools, some heated indoor pools inside some of these buildings. So they're energy hogs. But so are the low-income buildings. On the other side of the Anacostia, in Anacostia neighborhood, you have buildings that haven't been properly maintained for decades, for 30, 40, 50, 60 years. We went into the Bronx. One of our first projects was a Catholic school that had a coal-burning heating system that had been converted to an oil-burning system. And this was in 2014. And so they're no longer burning coal in the basement, but they're burning oil. And that level of neglect over decades, it's not a pleasant building to operate in. In one of the schools we were working with, 70-80% of the kids had asthma, and this is a way of answering your question. And so the school nurse had all these Ziploc bags for each kid's asthma inhaler, because when a kid's having an asthma attack, they can't recognize which inhaler's then, so she put a little piece of tape and write the kid's name, which inhaler goes to which kid, because all the kids have asthma. And it turns out that the oil-burning heating system and hot water system in the basement, of course, is burning oil and producing pollution that gets routed into the building's ventilation and air filtration system and actually dumped all the pollution from the burnt oil into the cafeteria. And so every day after lunch, all of these 4-, 5-, and 6-year-olds would go have lunch, and they'd have a massive amount of asthma attacks. right? And one day they called us and said, hey, we really need help. We unfortunately had a kid die.
Oh my God.
So imagine not only going to school in a place where you can't breathe and where everybody has asthma, but like you have asthma and then your classmate had asthma and now they're dead and you got to go back to school the next day and figure it out. So how do you raise clean energy and sustainability to a higher place on the list of priorities? Well, you don't necessarily talk about clean energy. We didn't go into that school and say, hey, we should fix up the school to save the planet.
Right.
All the kids are sick. Nobody can learn. Everybody's devastated, and it's because of this fossil fuel system. So that's in the basement. So looking at the full implications, financial, operational, the facilities manager has a difficult time managing this ancient oil-burning system, as well as health and other considerations. Talking to folks about which of those things is the most important to them. Is it because paying for oil and burning it is super expensive and inefficient and wasteful? And so if we upgrade to solar and a clean energy all-electric system, the principal now has $250,000 a year of extra money that they can use for their school budget? Or is it the fact that they want to reduce asthma? And so that's why our customers want to work with us. And oh, by the way, you happen to be saving the planet, which of course is great icing on the cake.
Wow, that's a powerful story.
It's not easy to do. It's really difficult to do, but that's the idea.
But,
Yeah.
but you're doing it. One of the things that it will, take to do that is changing over our workforce. I think that's a really important key to this puzzle. And Jonathan, I wanted to ask you about, the need to have a clean energy workforce. It's crucial for us to meet our goals to be able to do that. Recently, the Biden administration announced the Climate Core Initiative. Mm-hmm. It's aimed at bringing young people into clean energy work. What challenges do you foresee for that plan to work?
Well, the first challenge is whether the support for that effort will be sustained over time. Young people are, and as my own kids go into this category, are eager to be part of the solution, right? They want to find ways that they can apply themselves, gain skills, and participate in this great endeavor. It's a huge challenge. It's an anvil hanging over our heads. It's also a great opportunity. It's exciting to be part of the solution. So budget is part of it. But then also, going forward, sustaining the growth opportunity and making sure that it's available in lots of different places, right? So some of the parts of our country that are going to be, that frankly are almost certainly going to be affected by the transition to clean energy include the places that have been creating the legacy energy systems. The workforces in those towns and cities, they're not the enemy. They do need opportunities. So it's really important that the Climate Corps also provides skills and upskilling in those communities as well.
Danelle, I know that workforce is something that you think about, and you have an innovative, it seems like, solution and partnership with New York City. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so our mayor, to build on what you said, our mayor, Eric Adams in New York City, is a former police officer, and we as a city elected him, after 2 years of Black Lives Matter protests that were really pulling the city apart, like so many other cities. We also had a spiking crime rate, like so many cities across the country. And what Eric Adams decided to do was, yes, he did increase the budget to the New York Police Department to try and address the crime rate. But he also set aside $400 million to train and hire at-risk individuals who were identified as being likely to be involved in crime, and we can argue about the methodology and is it appropriate. In many instances, it was folks who witnessed a violent crime, who personally witnessed an incident of gun violence. And the data shows that those folks are far more likely to go out and buy a gun and therefore more likely to be involved in a future incident of gun violence. So in New York City, if you're in one of the 5 highest crime communities and you've witnessed an incident of gun violence, then you're qualified for the mayor's Civilian Climate Corps program in New York, where we are the program manager and we pay you and train you and hire you for 6 months to learn how to install solar, heat pumps, electric vehicle charging stations, and a range of other clean energy technologies. We took a team of young people who grew up in the poorest neighborhood in the city, Brownsville, Brooklyn, where Mike Tyson grew up. It's a terrible neighborhood still. And a lot of them had been locked up in Rikers Island, but we took them to Rikers Island and they installed solar charging, parking lots in the Rikers Island infrastructure, which was really powerful and for them. And so far we've trained over 2,000 people, and we try to prepare them to enter the clean energy workforce. But as Professor Elkind said, construction in America is not where it needs to be. It's highly inefficient, and really needs to be innovated. And so we want to train folks not just in the construction practices of the past, but we train them on using augmented reality and other kinds of technologies so that they're on the bleeding edge of innovation. So as they enter the clean energy workforce, they're really positioned for future success. And so we're super proud of that program. I should mention some of the downsides, right? I mean, people are super traumatized. They've all, by definition, seen horrible things and witnessed acts of gun violence, which stays with you for your life. And so we have a bunch of social workers that do trauma-based counseling and psychological services for each and every individual, which is expensive, but super important. And then some of the graduates aren't fully ready to enter the full workforce. Like, they're too depressed, they're too demoralized, they need more counseling, they need more work. So every trainee has their own journey, but trying to create an opportunity for folks to find their way into clean energy, we're really proud of that. And then last, on the National Climate Corps, I'm so proud of the president and the Sunrise Movement, all the young Gen Z kids who really protested and advocated for that policy. I just think it's a massively important policy. Think of kids, whether they're Republican or evangelical Christians or independents or rural or urban or on the other side of the aisle. We can bring this generation of young people together. They all agree that we're in a climate crisis and they're going to work on it together, and I think it bodes well for the future of the country.
Can I just add 2 quick things? First of all, that point that Donnell made about, it doesn't always end in sunshine and roses for each and every, that to me attests to the importance of, as a society, our getting much more deeply engaged around workforce development, trying different things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and learning over time. Second small point, we're talking about this as, people sitting in one of the world's most wealthy economies. Think about the workforce challenges in the developing world as well. They are there, they're massive. Again, it's an opportunity, but we actually have to address it. We've got to get busy working on it.
And if we don't, we are not going to be able to implement the IRA at scale. And that's the killer secret that needs more conversation. It's an incredible once in a lifetime moment. If we do not rapidly figure out what the workforce development strategy is for America to implement the IRA, we're not going to have a workforce that's well-trained. That means we're not going to have properly completed projects. That means that on the local news, it's going to say, well, federal dollars from the Biden-Harris administration came in and they screwed up this person's house and it didn't go well. And then it's going to be in the local news, and then the local Republican congressman is going to drag us into investigations in Congress. So
You just gamed it all out for us.
that's the game we're all playing. And so investment in workforce development is critical to intervening in that.
I want to zoom out globally for a moment, and you just touched on it, I think, a moment ago, Jonathan, about it's not just about what's happening here in the U.S. workforce, but what is happening globally. Maybe say a little bit more about that. And then I'm also very interested there's an ongoing war in Ukraine that has really affected our supply chain. That actually impacts us here. I think it's impacted you, Donnell.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about those implications.
Well, let me just start by saying that one of the things that makes responding properly to climate A challenging thing is that we need to work fast. We need speed. We need scale. We need to do lots of different things in lots of different parts of our economy and around our globe. And we also need to sustain that effort over the long haul and, over time, get more and more and more ambitious as we go. So a part of that says that we need to think about some of the big structural problems. We've just been talking about one, which is workforce. Siting and permitting. What gets built where and whose interests get affected how by those decisions? It's another really hard, really sensitive issue. It's not just a US issue. You see it in Europe, in other advanced economies, and oh, by the way, also across the developing world. The need for capital. We are so negligent in terms of engaging on the problems that are facing poorer countries. And I think, as Donnell's experience with Block Power has shown, not just poorer countries, but poorer parts of our own country, right? We are happy to have the capital flows go to places where there are good returns to be made and the prospects are really good. We're really weak at the business of seeing, okay, how is it that we could help capital also to flow to other destinations? We really need to be much better at doing that. So lots of unifying themes that are in front of us. Lots of challenges around, as you said, supply chains, and none of them gets better by just wiggling your nose and doing magical thinking. If we're going to have the minerals, for example, to enable wind power and high efficiency lighting and high efficiency computing and all kinds of, and just simply electrification, the growth in the grid transmission that we need. If we're going to have those minerals, we will be reliant on the current market, which is heavily dominated by one country, that's China, or we will build those capabilities in the United States and elsewhere around the globe. None of this happens by magic. It is all concerted, focused effort.
Donnell, you were nodding along about the supply chain issues. I'm curious to hear how that impacts on the ground.
Total disaster.
Don't sugarcoat.
What a mess. So the New York State government was invited along with us. We have a research and development for clean energy in New York called NYSERDA, New York State Energy Research Development Authority. So they were invited along with us to a freezing church in Westchester, New York, just north of New York City. And the pastor was adamant that he was not going to replace his fossil fuel oil system in his 150-year-old Episcopal church. He just was not going to put another fossil fuel system, neither oil nor gas. He wanted to leapfrog the heat pumps. And so he was like, we have no heat in the church, but we're going to hold a meeting in the church. Please bring your winter coat. So we all showed up. We kind of negotiated a pilot project to see if we could electrify this church fully, which we did in the middle of the pandemic. And we, put in heat pumps and about $700,000 of investment. And NYSERDA put in some money. The utility put in some money. We had investors, Eric and Wendy Schmidt, loaned us some money to invest. And we did that in several churches to test out, could you really electrify old, leaky, giant community buildings and houses of worship? And the supply chain stuff and the war in Ukraine, spiked the electricity prices. And so we told the churches, hey, we're going to move you off of fossil fuels, and we think that your energy bill is going to be reduced by 30% or 20%. But during that time period, electricity costs spiked across the country, and in particular in New York. And so the energy savings that we projected to materialize have been eaten away at by energy prices and inflation. And so the cost of construction, the cost of electricity goes up. We have to push back. We got to go back and put solar on top of all those churches so they can run their electric heating systems from solar and electricity that they generate on site, right? So we're trying to find responses, but it is a challenge.
Jonathan, I want to, on the supply chain issue, it also highlights the intersection of climate and trade policies, which is something I know you think about in thinking about a transition for all, and that is everyone globally. Do you see trade and climate policy, are they working together? Are they working in opposition of one another right now?
It's a really sensitive point of intersection. And so working together, I don't think I could fully say that. We need a functioning trading system in order to be able to mobilize climate solutions fast enough. But trade is one of the really, really few issues where if you go over to Capitol Hill, on both sides of the aisle, you'll hear a great degree of skepticism about trade. Trade is what enables goods and services to move across borders faster than they otherwise would, because if you're waiting and building a factory in each and every country, it's going to take a long time. But in view of, I won't say more in view of time, but just it's a super problematic space right now. And frankly, we gotta fix the trading system because right now the degree of disbelief or lack of faith in the trading system in the United States is just off the charts.
Thank you both. This has been such an illuminating conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you
so much.
For a conversation produced by our underwriter, Southern Company, about harnessing innovation for a net zero future, please welcome Chris Comiskey, Executive Vice President and Chief Commercial and Customer Solutions Officer at Southern Company. And joining him, Matteo Jaramillo, CEO at Form Energy.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm Chris Comiskey. I'm the Chief Commercial and Customer Solutions Officer at Southern Company. I think most of y'all know, but Southern Company is about a 44 gigawatt electric company and gas company in the southeast United States, but also has places in Virginia and Illinois as well. And this is Matteo from Form Energy, co-founder and CEO. Matteo is also at Tesla's, I think, stationary battery leader for years. I'm going to sort of address why we're having this talk about innovation from the utility perspective, and then I'm going to really turn it over to Matteo because what they're doing is absolutely imperative to get done to do what we need to do. When you look at the utility side of this equation, we have a 2050 net zero, and we're halfway there already. We expect it to be that way about 2030. We're well ahead of that schedule, and we can see a line of sight, I would say, for the next 20, 30%, whatever that number is. That last 10 to 20%, though, we need technological advancement. We need innovation. We can see where it could come from, things like long energy storage, long duration energy storage. You can see it from hydrogen and other things, carbon capture. But they have to become reality, and they got to become price sensitive. 50% of our customers make less than $50,000 a year. So we believe we can get to net zero. We got to do it affordably. And the only way we're going to do that is with innovation. And I will tell you, Matteo's work that they're doing is a huge step to get there. And I'm going to let you talk about that, and then we can have a conversation afterwards about what you're doing, how you're doing it, maybe talk a little bit about how you're going to get folks to adopt this technology. You've already proven some of that out with us and others. And then how you're going to scale it up, because there is a time issue here. I mean, we got to do this fast. We got to do it in a hurry. And the good thing about Matteo and Form is they are well down the path to getting to reality. So, Matteo?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's great to be here. And it's great to work with Southern. You know, I think the utility industry gets a bad rap, or has historically gotten a bad rap, about what it does in innovation and what its role is sort of actively in bringing it into the market. There was a joke, I don't hear this joke anymore, I used to hear this joke, that the dog food industry spent more on R&D than the utility industry annually. I think it's pretty safe to say that's not true anymore, even if it was true at one point. It's definitely no longer true. And you have utilities like Southern and some of the other folks that we do work with, Xcel Energy, Dominion, others, who are really driving the pace of innovation. The way that they do that is by taking first-of-a-kind risk on a project. And part of the inversion that's happened in the industry as well is the least risky thing to do is no longer to do nothing. For a long time, you didn't try anything because that was risky. And the main goal of the utility was, of course, reliability and low rates and serving everybody, right? That was the social compact. And my own window into the utility industry is through energy storage. I can't really explain it, but I've had a 2-decade-long fascination with batteries, and I continue to be really curious about batteries for some reason. I'm grateful that I found the topic about which I'm so curious. It took me to Tesla. I spent 7 years there. I built the Tesla energy business. And after I left Tesla in 2016, I started to think about what comes next for batteries. What are the frontiers there? Lithium-ion very clearly was going to have a big role to play on the grid, continue to get cheaper. But I talked to all these utility folks, including some of Chris's colleagues there at Southern, and the refrain I kept hearing was, lithium-ion's great, we'll go deploy a good amount of it, but the real challenge is how do I replace the function of the coal that I'm losing today and that I know I'm going to be losing going into the future? And so that was the core question that we set out to answer for what became Form Energy. We ended up settling on iron ore as a chemistry. Reversibly rusting iron is the battery. And that is, in our estimation, and a lot of work behind it now, $800 million into the company later, we're quite sure that is going to be a very cost-effective way to address these multiple day durations you need to functionally support the system for the full decarbonized reliability that we're going for. So I'll stop there, but it's been a great interaction so far.
And I think you may hit the real point, though, is you got affordability and reliability. And the reliability is important, too. And in the Southeast especially, you don't really have wind. So you only have solar, and we got 24/7 loads to serve. And by the way, I remember 5 years ago, we were talking about the utility death spiral. Customer usage is going down, utilities are going to go away. The amount of growth utilities are seeing because of data centers and other things are 24/7, you can't replace that without something like long duration storage. Short duration storage can't get you there affordably. It's going to be part of the solution, by the way. He's not displacing it. It's an addition to it. But our loads are more and more becoming 24/7. I mean, it's going to be amazing, I think, in 10 years when you look at utility and you say to yourself, what percentage of their load is 24/7 in terms of customers? It's growing exponentially. And because of that, it's making it even more important that we have these type of solutions. So when you look at the government assistance, the IRA, and everything else, obviously it's been a huge win for not just you all and your growth, for our customers. The money that we save is going back to our customers. What do you see the strengths of the IRA? What's really helped you, and what things do we still have to sort of solve, you think?
Well, I think the IRA did, in a lot of ways, what you hope the federal government does, which is set really big goals and then provide sort of strong injections to get there. And identify pathways for the state and local governments to participate as well. To do anything as transformative as what the IRA anticipates, it can't be just top down. It's got to be bottoms up as well. And we've seen this directly firsthand. Yes, huge demand is jump-started by the provisions in the IRA, especially for the investment tax credit on the renewable energy production side of things and the storage qualifying for that and manufacturing tax credits. But we have to go build manufacturing facilities. We have to hire people, and we have to do those in places where it can be done, frankly. You can't go, I'm a native Californian. I love California. I live in Pittsburgh now, and the reason I live in Pittsburgh is because we're building a manufacturing plant in Weirton, West Virginia, which is 33 miles from Pittsburgh, because there's an old steel site that we can actually go build a plant on in a reasonable time frame. We could not, with all apologies to my dear friends in California, we could not have done that in California. It's not possible. And so we also wouldn't have done it without the state of West Virginia. The huge support there. We got almost $300 million from the state to revitalize a town, the northern panhandle of West Virginia. They lost 14,000 jobs 20 years ago when that steel plant closed. And it's been decimated economically ever since. And we're going to go back into this site. We're not going to hire 14,000 people, more like 750. But it's a way to start to bring all that back. And so we see the top-down working, and we see the bottom-up working. The town of Weirton, Hancock County in West Virginia, and the state of West Virginia working. Sometimes they may not like the idea that they're working with the federal government, but they are. And sometimes the federal government, may think a little bit weird about, these bridges that are being built. But, in my mind, it's doing exactly what it should be doing. And we're going to bring great jobs to a community that really needs it. And we're really happy to be there.
So I'll try to fit in one more question. For 30 years, we've always talked to Southern Company. That's a great. For 30 years at Southern Company, I think most utilities, we've always talked about every arrow in the quiver in terms of generation and what we're going to bring to the table. We're not going to be dependent on one. It's going to be an array from solar to gas to renewables to nuclear. So I say to say now it feels like for the utility, it's not going to be all the arrows in the quiver for generation side. it's going to be on the decarbonization side. So you got your technology, you see a good line of sight. I know all the technologies are probably one day going to be there. What's the next one you think's the quickest to get deployed in a mass fashion? Or one we should be looking at, or two?
Well, I'm still fairly optimistic for nuclear. I feel like that has to come back in a meaningful way, especially in a small modular nuclear reactors.
That's a Southern Company clap, by the way.
Chris was involved in a big nuclear project in Georgia. But it really is going to take all the above. There's no silver arrow in the quiver that solves all problems. There's no panacea. The grid works as a portfolio. It works as a combination of assets that complement each other. There is no perfect asset. There's some flaw that I could identify about any one of them. And it's only by working them in concert intelligently, of course, at all levels, right? Large centralized as well as distributed behind the meter, as well as the load showing up in the right ways. It's just, we need to be able to bring all of it to bear to solve the huge problem that's before us.
Well, listen, we appreciate the time. Matteo, your success is going to be our success. We're all rooting for you. You're doing a great job. Thank you for all the work you're doing and the whole industry is doing. But thank you all very much for the time today.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks.
Here to discuss scaling infrastructure through cross-sector collaboration, please welcome Richard Newell, President and CEO of Resources for the Future, and Evelyn Wang, Director of ARPA-E at the U.S. Department of Energy. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic Managing Editor Andrea Valdez.
Hello, thank you all for coming. Thank you both for coming.
Absolutely.
Really excited about this conversation. So I wanted to set the table a little bit here. I'm sure we've talked about this a lot already in this room, but Richard, I was hoping that you could talk about why the Inflation Reduction Act was so significant in terms of environmental legislation and how it adopted a more carrots versus sticks approach.
Sure, yeah. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed and signed into law a little bit over a year ago, is by far the most ambitious and consequential and far-reaching, comprehensive piece of climate legislation in the United States ever, period. And on a global scale, also equally a very, very significant magnitude. The estimates now, we participated in a recent project to estimate what the emissions impact of the Inflation Act would be, work with a number of different researchers deploying various models of what the energy future looks like. And estimates are that it would lead to about a 43 to 48% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, and that's relative to 2005 levels. So this goes a long way in terms of achieving the goals that the U.S. has put forward to meet the International Climate Agreement, the Paris Agreement. And it does it in a way, as you were saying, that takes a different approach than many of us who've worked on climate change and climate policy and energy policy for really decades. It takes a different approach than we actually thought would happen. And it takes what you said, a carrots approach. What does that mean? Well, that means that the policies are working by providing positive incentives for clean energy technology and climate solutions rather than penalizing emitting technologies. So that's the carrots rather than the sticks approach. It does that through tax credits, tax incentives for private investment in a very wide range of clean energy technologies. It does it through direct public funding of grant programs and things like that. It also does it through support of things what are called like loan guarantees. So the government guaranteeing the debt on clean energy investment. So really it's all operating principally through the private sector and incentivizing the deployment of clean energy technology. So this is different than a sticks approach. A sticks approach would be using regulations, mandates, or taxes on emitting energy sources, let's say coal, natural gas combustion, gasoline combustion, and things like that. So it's a different approach. And it has advantages and disadvantages. The advantages, like a big advantage is it passed the U.S. Congress and it was signed into law. So it had political feasibility, whereas the policies that many of us have focused on, they just didn't have the support they needed. And we can go into why that is. The thing that it doesn't do is when you're investing in positive incentives for new investment, there's all the existing infrastructure that's already there. And so the carrots approach really does need to be balanced with incentives that will also lead to the retirement of emitting sources over time. And so without that kind of two-pronged approach, you're missing a big part of the equation, but it's a huge advance in terms of incentives for reducing U.S. emissions.
Yeah, thank you. Evelyn, you are at ARPA-E, and maybe not everybody is familiar with what ARPA-E does and how it works. I thought you could give us a bit of a primer on that.
Sure, happy to do so. So ARPA-E is an agency that supports high-risk, high-reward transformational energy projects. And the projects that we support really are ranging from all sorts of ways to generate, store, and use energy. We are an early stage R&D agency, so a lot of the things that we're supporting, we don't know if even it's going to work when you start the project. However, the hope is after a 3-4 year effort that, in fact, you can show a proof of concept. Of course, but our ultimate goal is to get it out to commercialize and out deploy at scale. And we know that often we need to now support further the technologies to do that. And this is where it's really important to engage the private sector, to engage our stakeholders so that they will invest when our projects are at the point of the end of their efforts, so that now that it can be picked up and move on to other sources of funding.
And what are some of the industries that you're seeing that are having the most benefit here that have gone to ARPA-E for funding?
I will say that the industries range all from the energy majors, the oil and gas industry, to that of the electric vehicle market, to that of industrial decarbonization, to that of renewables. It just ranges across a whole spectrum. And that's how we think about what our role is, that we, in fact, provide all the options. We're not picking winners. We're creating the playing field and allowing all these potential technologies to be successful. We know that, in fact, there's not one solution for all the challenges that we need to address as we're working towards net zero emissions by 2050. So we want to now really support a range of approaches to do so.
And so, okay, so you say you're investing, ARPA-E is investing in early stage research, but you want them to scale up. So what is it that you are doing to get there? You were talking about a program earlier called Scale Up. Is that something that's ARPA-E is doing more of to make sure that, in fact, that scaling can happen? What is that process?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I mentioned a lot of our work is early stage R&D. And I mentioned that the whole goal is to risk the technology so that private sector will invest. We started a program called Scale Up about 2019. And what we realized is that because a lot of the projects are so early stage, that it's still too early for the private sector to invest. So we started a program called Scale Up, so that as the name it implies that the whole goal is to help further mature the technology, is to provide a path to market. And so I'll give you an example of maybe a project. Maybe you can put some concrete idea about what Scale Up is. So we have been supporting a project with a company it's a startup company called Ampere, and they're working on hybrid electric aircraft. And we know that with electrification of aircraft, there's a huge potential. In the next decade, we can reduce about 50% of fuel emissions and 25% on operational costs if we can now achieve electrified aircrafts. And so Ampere, in fact, has been working towards this goal, and we were supporting their first test bed to be able to now introduce new types of electronics, power electronics, fuel cells, batteries on their test platform so they could start to realize the potential of the hybrid electric as a first step towards electrification of aviation. And so we started working with them in an early program. We have acronyms for all our programs. So it was called Circuits, and it was focused on power electronics. And with Scale Up, in fact, we've been supporting now their subsequent effort to now transition from their early test bed to a larger test bed, a 9-seater eco caravan, to start to now take advantage of also the innovations of some of our other projects and start to realize hybrid electric aircraft. And one of the big historic moments, in fact, I just witnessed with Ampere, in fact, was a 3,400-mile series of flights where they're based from Southern California all the way to Fairbanks, Alaska, which is the longest kind of series of flights that any hybrid electric aircraft has taken. So it's really historic. And what's exciting about that journey is also getting to Alaska. It not only can address some of the challenges I just mentioned about the push towards electrified aviation, but also being able to address some of the challenges local communities, being able to transport goods, services, medical supplies to remote communities that exist in Alaska, where hydroelectric aircrafts can really pave a way for that possibility.
Interesting. So Richard, where there's more money, there's more excitement, there's more incentive. But there are, I'm sure, still some big roadblocks for companies. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the roadblocks might be, even though there are these incentives and there is this money?
Yeah. So the headline numbers that you would have seen in the newspaper when the Inflation Reduction Act was passed were around $380, $400 billion of tax expenditures and direct public funding over the life of the policy. And that could be an underestimate, it could be an overestimate of how much financing and how much technology deployment would have. It could be a very significant underestimate because much of this is in the way of tax incentives, and so they're not capped, right? So the amount of investment that happens is going to be dependent upon how much the private sector takes up these incentives, which are very significant incentives. So the incentives are definitely large enough to move capital to tilt the balance toward clean energy and climate solutions relative to the alternative. The impediments are manyfold. And one of the ways that I think about it is that clean energy and climate solutions are facing many of the headwinds that traditional energy infrastructure and all kinds of infrastructure has faced historically. You need to site things locally in communities. You need to, if you're building like pipelines or transmission lines, they need to cut across many different jurisdictional boundaries, cities, counties, states. You also need to get through sometimes if there's any kind of federal land or something involved, you need to go through something called the NEPA process, National Environmental Policy Act, which is a process that demands an environmental impact statement be done on the project to ensure that it's not having undue environmental impact. So all of these hurdles, in a sense, all these processes are very important because they allow communities to express their desire to have a project. They allow the environmental impacts of a project to be addressed. They also slow things down. And so there is this push and pull when we think about the energy transition. There's a very important sense of urgency to solve the climate challenge. We're way behind on where we should be in terms of the urgency with moving forward with the energy transition. On the other hand, we need to do this in a way that respects local communities, that respects different types of justice. That lets people have a say, that protects the environment at the same time that we're having an energy transition. This is not an easy balance. There's been a number of different proposals. There were some modest reforms that were included in the budget reconciliation last year. There's been a number of different proposals from both sides of the aisle. So there is bipartisan interest in this. But I've already alluded to some of the challenges you would see because there's reasons that we have these processes in place. And so the reforms need to make things quicker at the same time that we respect the purpose of these processes.
Can you point to any examples of places where we've seen maybe some of these roadblocks taken down or softened, or communities have rallied around a way to expedite some projects that ordinarily might get caught in red tape or bureaucracy or something like that?
Well, having community buy-in is hugely important. And there's lots of stories of communities that welcome energy infrastructure. Places that need employment. They want the revenue, the public revenue that comes in from having business in their communities. They want to be part of the energy future and the climate future. And so it's not like all communities are not in my backyard. So I'd say the places where you see the most success stories is where the community actively is looking for the project. So. There's a number of different reforms. Some of them are taking the form of, just kind of cutting red tape, putting limits on the process so that you don't have, 1,000-page environmental impact statements, that it's constrained. There's some proposals for putting time limits on it, so that it doesn't get unduly slowed down in the bureaucracy. There's proposals around the amount of litigation that can happen. So after a decision is made, it can then go to courts and get litigated. So there's some proposals to limit the degree to which something can be litigated once a decision has been made. So those are the natures of it, but it is extremely place-based and context-specific. But the thing that's clear when you add up all of these individual cases, it simply takes too long. And so unless something changes from the rate at which we've been able to build things in the past, we won't come close to the rapidity of the energy transition that we actually need.
Well, so I'm curious from both of you, if it is very, place-oriented, community-oriented, which this is good. This is, kind of the way things work. How can we achieve the scaling up, right? Do you have any thoughts or recommendations or, examples of what that might look like and how that could take place?
I think there are, certainly as we think about technologies, I think it's really important about all the communities that we're trying to address, and how do we think about what needs they have in particular. And I think I spoke to Alaska. I think we recognized when we went to visit Alaska that there are needs that are very different in Fairbanks and Anchorage as compared to the remote villages. And so I think as we develop technologies, we do have to keep that in mind as we're tailoring, as we're developing technologies, and who are going to be the users, how they're going to think about, how do you actually operate it, how do you actually deal with it at the end of life. All these aspects are very important. I will say that some of our programs are particularly thinking about kind of a range of communities. An example is a program for electrification of vehicles. It's actually focused on batteries. It's called EVs for All. And we know that 1/3 of Americans don't have access to charging ports like in garages and those aspects and ports. And so the whole idea is, can we develop a battery? So we define metrics that make it amenable, that they can deal with really harsh conditions. Can we charge fast enough of that battery so that you don't have to have a garage, and make it convenient so that we can address larger populations of the community here in the US?
One of the things, it's not exactly the question you asked, but I was struck by both the prior panel and something Evelyn was saying earlier. And this was, I don't think, preordained, which is I think that the approach is currently being taken to the energy transition and to climate solutions is much more technology inclusive than might have been the case. And so when you've probably heard like a wide different swath of technologies, and really the options continue to increase, but we're talking about wind, we're talking about solar, we're talking about energy storage, we're talking about existing nuclear plants, new, advanced nuclear plants. We're talking about hydrogen produced from natural gas with carbon capture and storage, and hydrogen produced through electrolysis. I mean, I could go on and on. And so one of the real benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, is that it took a very comprehensive approach, and it was very open-minded in terms of the different types of technologies that were supported, with the kind of clear entry point being that it should reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so what is this relevant to the permitting thing? I think it's very relevant, not just because it makes it more feasible to address climate change if we have a broader set of technological options. It also makes it less expensive. It also makes it more jurisdictionally and geographically feasible, right? Different communities have assets. Some communities are going to welcome a nuclear plant. Other communities are going to welcome solar energy. Other communities might not like wind power, but they might like some other source. So this is not just true for the United States, but also globally. Different communities and different countries will have different natural assets and even ideological inclinations. And so the more open-minded we can be about technology, might not be clear at first, but that also makes things much more politically feasible and community feasible.
So I want to follow up a little bit on that, which is, I think people might be reluctant to have certain things in their backyard, so to speak, because they see second-order consequences of things that were new, exciting technologies 50, 60, 80 years ago, and they want to make sure that those second-order consequences, if there are negative ones, don't come to bear on that. So what's the responsibility? Does ARPA-E invest in research that might be thinking about these second-order consequences? How do we build responsibly, I guess, is the question for both of you.
Absolutely. I think responsibility is very important to us, and we have been thinking about it actively as we're developing technologies. I just mentioned, often when you think about end of life, a lot of things end up in landfills. And now what do you do about that, right? And so as we're now thinking about new programs, one of the areas we know with batteries, what they do is they shred them, and it ends up in a landfill, and you can't do anything with it. And not to mention that the critical mineral supply and all of that, and supply chains as you're developing technologies are very important. So we've been thinking about circularity. So one of the new efforts that we're interested in is, can we think about battery circularity, where recycling, in fact, is the last resort? And we think about now when we're developing technologies, we're developing battery technology, to think about how do you potentially manufacture it in a way such that it can be reused, repurposed in a way, and it's very different how you would design a battery in that way versus how we do it now, right? With all the adhesives, it's really hard to actually get rid of all that stuff. And so this is where I think beyond batteries, I think there are opportunities in this concept of circularity that I think we could instill as we're developing technological innovation.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I was thinking about circularity and circular economy, exactly the same. It's, it can be really hard. Sometimes it can be hard to anticipate, right? And so one thing you need to do is be constantly monitoring this issue. I think actually, batteries and electric vehicles is a great example, because that's an issue that we know is coming, right? As as batteries expand. But one of the challenges has been we're not quite there yet. Like, we're not at the scale yet that would fully enable a huge recycling economy. But we know that's coming. So it's one of these areas where you just have to be constantly monitoring, watching, adjusting policy. One of the things, though, that was interesting in the Inflation Reduction Act, kind of a little-known program, was to use decommissioned sites and kind of brownfield sites, so sites that have historically been places where there was either environmental waste, or there may have been a coal plant that's retired, and actually repurpose those sites and reuse those sites for some kind of a new clean energy development. And so I think also, doing something good with past wrongs is also something we should keep in mind. I'll just say one final thing on this. Environmental justice has also been a very important part, and that a lot of that is about addressing, legacy problems that have been built up. And I think that one of the other things which you did not see previously in major energy or climate legislation was the attention to both kind of domestic manufacturing on the one hand, and also the distributional impacts of policy was very evident throughout the Inflation Reduction Act. Just one example of that, there's extra tax credits for what are called energy communities in there. So these are communities that might be located near a coal plant or near some type of environmental waste site. And it has extra tax credits for development in those communities. So this is a way to, first of all, incentivize communities to see an economic benefit for bringing in new infrastructure, and also potentially a way to, transition from kind of a legacy of environmental harm to something different in the future.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. Evelyn, I do want to ask, what is the most bonkers, crazy thing that RPE has invested in or is investing in? Like, what's the thing that, might feel sci-fi today, but in 30, 40, maybe 10 years, who knows, will feel very everyday? Do you have any?
Well, I think maybe everyone will be thinking this. We've been supporting fusion for many years now, and in fact, I think this is when now you can see there's probably like tens of companies now looking at fusion and commercializing fusion. And this is an investment that we started maybe like 7, 8 years ago now, when we said, look, we should look at this. And it seemed far out. Everyone says it's a decade out. It's always a decade out.
It's usually 3 decades
okay,
out.
3 decades out. But I think we're starting to see progress there, right? And I think obviously the Livermore experiment that happened earlier this year to show that you can get more energy out than energy in, I think is one opportunity to suggest that, okay, there was progress, right? And we've been supporting, though, as we think about it, I mentioned that we work on the high risk, high reward element, and fusion is a very big problem. And so we have to think about where we contribute, where we can really push the needle there. And while Livermore has now what we call demonstrated the spark of fusion, what we're trying to create is the fireplace. So the engineering, beyond just being able to show that fusion can happen, is all the rest of the balance of plant, all the things surrounding it to actually make it a reality. So one of the things we're looking at right now, in fact, is, well, there's so much neutron flux, so much heat flux. It's such extreme conditions when you have this plasma and you have this fusion that happens. Now, how do you have materials that can sustain such harsh conditions? Right now, materials don't exist, frankly. So one of the opportunities for us is that, okay, can we take advantage of now advanced approaches, materials discovery, and be able to take advantage of AI? And that combination potentially could now enable a new class of materials that could potentially start building this fireplace. That's just the first wall. Of course, there's many other things around it, right? But taking it one step at a time to start to think about elements to start to build this fireplace, that I think will lend itself to a path for the sci-fi to be real.
So maybe not 30 years out, maybe 10 years out.
Maybe, I'm saying 10 years away.
One of the things that is really interesting about energy and energy innovation is the system tends to change very slowly. There's a huge amount of inertia. There's a huge amount of fixed capital stock to the energy system. You think, cars and pipelines and power plants and industrial facilities. Changes very slowly until it doesn't. And there are these points in time when things can actually shift quite quickly. And so, one example is like the shale gas and tight oil revolution. Like U.S. oil and gas production was going down. Guess what happened? There was a technological innovation that enabled unlocking of resources that weren't there. Wind and solar. So solar energy, the concept of solar PV, it's been around since the 1970s. And there was a very long period of time until about 10 years or so ago when it was much more expensive. That's just the reality, right? And then it came down by like 80, 90% in a decade. And wind, which looked like was cheaper than solar, but was also considered a mature technology, that came down by 80%. So this can happen really, and we're now seeing it with, I think, electrical vehicles and batteries. So the technological system can change very slowly. So you brought up fusion. I think fusion could be a similar story. And so I think we do need to be humble sometimes. There's a lot of skepticism that goes on around these ideas, even particularly ones that have been around for several decades, that they're just never going to pan out. And then something happens. There's some innovation maybe somewhere else, like supermagnets that contain the plasma that can jump in and change things relatively quickly.
So I guess my last question is, I think a lot of people are always, what can I do? What should I do to try and make it feel more personal? We're talking about, again, infrastructure. These are huge things. They feel very big and beyond our control. Is there anything that you can say to this group of people of what it is that they can be doing from your perspective that can help, change our infrastructure, change, the way it is that we're, thinking about energy from a large scale perspective?
In my opinion, it's really an all-hands-on-deck moment, and I think we all have a role to contribute to being able to now think about a clean, sustainable future. And I think as we think about our ecosystem that we're trying to create in the energy innovation community, it's very much that we need to engage the researchers, the entrepreneurs, the stakeholders, and investors, just everyone, because there is a role to play to help us push technologies forward. And I think as we think about innovation and concepts like nuclear and fusion, people are often a little bit hesitant to adopt new technologies. And I think this is our opportunity as we're working together in all different aspects. We talked about community engagement earlier. I think all of this requires all of us to be engaged at many levels, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're an inventor of technology, or whether you are a user of technology, that we need to come together, understand still where are the current challenges and bottlenecks, and to be able to push forward together to really advance the technologies.
Anything quickly to add, or?
Well, one of the things that is definitely changed is just as an individual consumer, the options that are emerging where you actually have a choice now, whereas in the past you wouldn't have had choice, they're much more available, right? And so you can choose between an electric vehicle and an internal combustion engine. You can, when you go to replace your water heater, you can replace with a different kind of water. You can choose a heat pump rather than a natural gas furnace. So there's all these options that didn't used to be there. And so I would say number one is educate yourself, and when next time somebody comes to do something in your house, ask a question and say what about this alternative here? I've heard about this thing. It may not work out for you, but you'll at least have considered it and consider the options. And the other thing I'd say is a lot of this is about systemic change. So I think individual behavior here is important, but these are massive systems. They require coordination and policy, decades-long investment. And so it really cannot be done at the individual level alone. So that requires people to express their preferences through how they vote, honestly, and their policy positions on different things. And so I think those are, I would say, and even the second one I would say is even more important than the first one, because so much of this is a systems level change that has to happen.
All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Up next, to talk about big bets transforming the future, please welcome Shreya Dave, founder and CEO of Via Separations, and Leah Ellis, founder and CEO of Sublime Systems. Here to lead the conversation is Atlantic Deputy Editor Paul Baseglio.
Hello. So we've just had interesting conversations about legislation and its global impact. Now we're going to take a look at technological innovation, specifically ones that have the potential to drastically reduce emissions and steer us away from the worst effects of climate change over time. At the end of this conversation, we'll open it up to audience questions. So in recent years, we've seen big progress in solar power and electric vehicles, two well-known, highly visible technologies. But so many industries are lagging behind. Two enormous sources of CO2 emissions are cement and chemicals. And you two are both at the forefront of greening those two industries. So, Shreya, you're on the chemical side of this. I've heard you use a pasta analogy to explain the problem that you're solving for. Can you explain that and also just tell us what we're even talking about when we say chemicals?
Yeah, absolutely. So we all use stuff every day, stuff made out of paper, plastic, fabric, rubber, all sorts of things. And making that requires inputs of chemicals and raw materials. And making those chemicals and raw materials use a lot of carbon. And so what we're doing at Via Separation is changing the way we make the raw materials by changing the way the separation step, which accounts for the majority of the cost, is done. So we've been doing it roughly the same way since the Industrial Revolution, which is, the analogy I use is we boil off all the water to get to pasta at the bottom of a pot instead of pouring it through a strainer in your sink. And that strainer at the industrial scale is 80% lower cost, 90% lower energy. It's fully electrifiable and it gives operational flexibility to industrial customers. And we make that strainer.
Great. So essentially, chemicals all around us, and you're making them greener.
Make everything that we use have less of an impact on the climate.
Yeah. Leah, you said that you're working on the electrical vehicle of cement. What does that mean?
Yeah, so today cement is made in these enormous fossil fuel-fired kilns. And I think, like you said before, cement is one of those things that go unnoticed to most people, but it's actually the biggest industry by mass in the world. So we use more cement than any other material besides water. And it's one of those things we're almost encased in cement for most of our days, but it's really out of sight, out of mind. So these massive cement plants, on average, produce about 1 million tons of cement a year. They're often out in the countryside next to a big quarry. They break down these minerals at temperatures that exceed 1,400 degrees Celsius. So it's extremely fossil intensive. It's a temperature that's very difficult to electrify efficiently. So what Sublime Systems is working on is the electric vehicle approach. So replacing high temperature combustion fossil fuel with an ambient temperature electrochemical approach that ultimately can also be more energy efficient while still making the material that we've been using for millennia.
I admit that cement is one of those things that, even as a person who is relatively well-read on carbon emissions, is still something I forget about just how big of an impact it has. Does it stress you out when you're walking around and just see cement and concrete everywhere?
It does, because of course Sublime has this ridiculously ambitious mission of having a swift and massive carbon impact. So I do. That my ambition is intimidating even to myself. But I guess the flip side of that is, even if Sublime succeeds in having a 1% or 10% impact for cement making, that's still huge. We are tackling, and both Shreya and I are just hanging on to one of the biggest levers that are available for decarbonization. And even if we make a small impact, it's going to be pretty big.
I'm intimidated by your ambition, too. So cement and chemicals are both part of industries that are conventionally thought of as hard to decarbonize, as opposed to, say, electric power or transportation, which have their own suite of problems, but are not considered as difficult. And in general, many clean energy innovations don't make it past the prototype stage. So first of all, what are the real hurdles here that both of you had encountered? Shreya, why don't we start with you?
I'll say that to start off, I think in industrial decarbonization, we are where we were in grid decarbonization maybe 15, 20 years ago. It was this big, massive problem. We hadn't broken it down into the components that we knew how to then solve with technology, but the problem was well understood. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of how that's going to change. Some of the very real problems are access to capital in big, risky ways that allow us to put things like manufacturing facilities, things like steel and cement in the ground in order to decarbonize these industries, particularly at the early but commercial scale.
Yeah, to build on what Shreya said, one of the biggest challenges you have for industrial decarbonization is a consequence of the scale of these industries. So cement and steel are both about 8% of global CO2 emissions, and both cement and steel are made at massive scale. And so if you're coming out with a brand new technology, you prove it at a small scale, but ultimately it has to become a really huge billion-dollar plant. And that's a big risk for someone to take on a first-of-a-kind technology, very capital-intensive. And so what both Shreya and I have done is validated at this small scale. We call it the cement plant for ants. And then, ultimately you have this big million ton per year, billion-dollar plant that no one will give you money for, if you're at that ant stage. And so you need this mid-sized plant. And that mid-sized plant is still wicked big and still wicked expensive, but it's not big enough where you can compete on cost with something that's scaled up to 1 million tons a year. And that's the challenge, is to get that mid-sized plant built. And I think the US government right now is through the Department of Energy, is putting a lot of money into making that gap a little bit easier to cross through grants. And once these technologies are proven, they can be exported all over the world to have a big climate impact.
If I can use a term that I hate, you're both essentially disruptors. You're coming to these fields that have these long-standing histories of operating in a certain way. You're innovating in them, and you're saying, let's do it this way, it's better, or more greener, whichever term you'd want to use. I think I have split emotions when I see innovations like that, because on the one hand, I'm in awe of the ingenuity that goes into them, and as a person who's climate conscious, I also feel so frustrated that it took us so long to actually do that sort of innovation. The question I want to ask on the biggest scale is, are we just not trying hard enough? What's going on?
Are we just not trying hard enough to bring these things?
Yeah. You two broke through the mold. Why haven't more people?
Why haven't more people?
So I have a thought there, which is the industries that we're disrupting are fundamental to our everyday. If we don't have cement, we don't have buildings, we don't have schools, we don't have parking lots, right? Asphalt. I'm not sure exactly. We don't have infrastructure that we need every day. And so it's the role of the company. If we don't have, let's call it paper, we don't have diapers, we don't have cardboard boxes for Amazon. So it's the role of these industries to not fix what isn't broken. It's their job to preserve the production, preserve the market that they have, preserve the jobs that they've created. And it's not their job for people like us to come in and change the way they're doing it. And I'm not going to say that I'm the world's expert on exactly how everybody should be running their process, but we are, I think, bold enough to think that we can have that impact and to take on that technology risk.
That brings to mind something, Leah, that you've said before, which is you've framed the importance of greening the cement industry not as a moral problem, but a business problem. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think there's pressures to decarbonize, and cement companies in particular they're feeling the pain the most. So cement companies are in fact the largest CO2 emitters in the world. And that might surprise people, because you may think that Aramco or Exxon are the biggest CO2 emitters, but they produce the fossil fuels that everyone else downstream burns. So their scope 1 emissions, the CO2 they release themselves, are quite small. It's cement companies that are the biggest emitters of CO2. And that's going to be a huge business problem for them, especially in places like the EU, where there's increasing pressure to decarbonize. And I would say, in the absence of pressure to decarbonize, it would not be a big business problem for them. And I think that's the role of government, to make these choices for business. I think the invisible hand of capitalism, as Shreya is saying, makes very poor short-term decisions, because these companies are not innovative, but that doesn't mean to say they don't do things well. They do the things that they do every day very well, which is rinse and repeat. It's make cement, deliver cement that's high quality and in sufficient volumes, and make the trains run on time. What they don't do well is innovate. And I think, that's where government has to guide the invisible hand and make it a fruitful place for innovators to take a shot at building new technologies that can then be integrated.
I have one thing to add to that, which I completely agree with, but I think that the dichotomy that is often painted is it's either green or it's cheap. And I don't think that, I know for a fact in the industries we're working in, that's not true. You can have a better product, you can do it using less carbon, and you can do it more cheaply, but you just have to want to do something new. And that's where our earliest customers get excited about doing something new. And our markets are all going to have to do that, because they're all building commodity or producing commodity materials.
Right, and to stay on that actually, Shreya, so you one of your earlier customers has been the pulp and paper industry, right? Could you use them as sort of an example of what you're talking about? Like, how have you made the case to them that there actually is a business proposition here, or what lessons have they taken away about the money aspect of this?
Yeah, there's a lot of examples here, but the one I'll use specifically is if you have a pot of pasta, you can only put so much pasta in that pot. You can only make so much.
Paper
you can only
pasta?
boil off paper pasta, right? You can only boil off so much water. And that part of a paper making facility tends to be the bottleneck. That means that that's the place where if they could just make a little bit more pasta, then everything else could run a little bit more smoothly. And so what we do is we come in and we say, okay, first of all, we're going to use 50% less steam as part of this process, which is a really big deal to them. It's going to lower their costs. But also, we're going to give you this flexibility. It means that if you have a really high order month, you can make a little bit more. Or maybe you have some maintenance you need to do. We can keep your trains running on time. And those start to add up into the value proposition that they really care about.
I asked Leah about getting stressed out about cement. Am I stressing you out right now?
Oh, no, I'm a notebook person. I love pen and paper,
yeah. Let's talk about just legislation briefly. The Inflation Reduction Act provides pretty serious investments in manufacturing industries. Is it enough? Leah, let's start with you.
No, I don't think it is enough, although it is a lot. But, I think the estimates are that we need to be spending upwards of $1 trillion a year if we're going to mitigate climate change. And I think we're only spending $1 trillion a year. So I don't think it's enough. And I think we have to spend that money wisely on the technologies that can have the most impact and can be deployed the soonest and that solve the root cause of the problems.
To just pick up on that thread, I think time matters a lot. There's this concept, the time value of carbon, that carbon not emitted or not emitted today is more valuable than carbon not emitted 10 years from now. And that's because there are going to be more options 10 years from now. That's because carbon stays in the atmosphere. And that's because as we kind of race towards climate change in many capacities, we got to be acting now. And I think the speed element is really important. And I think that there is a market pressure to put money into the things that, into some specific technology winners. And I think that we could do well with technology agnostic policy. We'll leave it there.
If you had lawmakers in front of you and could demand a single thing, what would it be? Whoever thinks of something good can go first.
Shreya and I were actually talking about this earlier. I think what would be super impactful is a carbon credit for technology-enabled carbon avoidance. So we all hear about carbon credits and carbon markets, and sometimes they're in the news for the wrong reasons because these carbon credits are meaningless. And so there's a spectrum where the most expensive carbon credits are the ones that are the most verifiable, the most permanent, and those right now are said to be direct air carbon capture credits, which are $300 a ton up to $600 a ton you pay to remove carbon. And then on the low end, you have nature-based solutions like, oh, pay me and I won't cut down this forest. And if the forest burns down, do you get a refund? No. And so those are like $10 a ton. And so what Shreya and I are doing, we're creating carbon avoidance technologies. Shreya's doing an efficiency technology. I'm doing an electric vehicle of cement type thing. But as soon as you bring up the word avoidance, you get priced in that low end with all the other technologies that avoid carbon. And these removal technologies are the ones that are the most expensive, and people are willing to pay a lot for carbon removal. And in my mind, that doesn't make sense. And I like to use the leaky tap analogy. And this is actually inspired by something that happened when I was in my PhD. So if you'll humor me, I'm going to tell a story. So in my PhD lab, there were two PhD students. They were not me, by the way. I was not involved. But they were working with a piece of water-chilled equipment. And that piece of equipment sprung a leak. And so they turned off the piece of equipment and they grabbed their mops and they started mopping, but the pool of water wasn't going away. And the lab manager came in, and these two PhD students got absolutely roasted because they hadn't looked to turn off the tap that was filling this water-chilled pieces of equipment with water. And I think this is an analogy for what's happening with CO2 emissions, where you have a leak that's creating a flood, and you have three options. You can fix the leak, you can turn off the tap, and that's carbon avoidance. And sometimes that can't be done fast enough. And so the next best option is to get a bucket and put it directly under the leak, and that is post-combustion carbon capture. And that's important because it puts the onus on the person doing emitting to do the cleaning up. And then there's the third option, which is to start mopping the water off the floor or to do direct air capture. And in my opinion, in a world where resources are scarce, where we're not spending enough money to mitigate climate change, you have to pick two out of the three. And some people are mopping the CO2 off the floor before they've invested in turning off the tap or putting a bucket under the leak. And I think that's pure greenwashing and a total, I think it's a treasonous allocation of capital, if I'm just going to throw out.
You've won the crowd's support. I'm sure we could spend another, easily double this time getting deep on carbon capture, but we are going to move into Q&A in just a minute. I wanted to ask really quickly, just fast response. This is about innovation and invention. I'm curious how you two find inspiration. What do you do to get in an inspirational mindset? Sherry, you want to go with you?
I think it's working with people. I think that it's so inspirational to me that everyone I work with has chosen to spend their 9 to 5 plus on solving the biggest challenge of our generation, of our time here on this planet. And I drive inspiration from them every day.
Yeah, I have to say I spend much less time inventing and being creative than I would like because I'm running a company and I'm no longer an inventor as I was before. But I have to say I've had the privilege of working with some brilliant inventors. And it has to do with the people. You need to have a sounding board to bounce new ideas off. And they need to be smart, trustworthy people who are going to yes and you and not say no because. But I think the other thing that you can do to be really creative is just try and think of a new idea every single day and keep it in a journal. And I do think that creativity and an invention is a muscle that you build over time. So if you have a mindset of I want to come up with new ideas, I want to solve a problem, every day just think of a new way, even if that idea sucks.
And they don't have to be technology based.
Anything.
And I think there's a misconception that to work at a company like ours or like Form Energy, you have to be a technical person. You don't. We need all types. We need creative types. We need people who can help us build the world-changing inventions.
Let's jump into audience questions. You just need to hop on a mic. We'll have just a few minutes for a couple. Ma'am, you first.
So I don't have to scream.
Oh, no, I apologize. Could you say your name as well?
I'm Shelley Myers, long retired, but delighted that you all are filling in the gaps here. And I'm so proud of both of you. My question is, do you have competition in your space, or are there a lot of people out there working on what you're working on?
I would say yes and no. There are many people that see this opportunity to work on cement, and there are a number of companies doing this. None that I think will be as successful as me, but of course that's my biased opinion. But we do work together. We've actually formed a policy consortium that I like to call the Thundering Cavalry, because really we're trying to push a broader change, and many of our technologies could win simultaneously. So even if we're competing for venture dollars, like the funding going into clean tech, I think, as I said, is not sufficient. And so we're each competing for that funding. But really, I think one of the joys of working in clean tech is that we're all mission aligned. Like, we're all doing this for the same reason, which is to have an impact on global CO2 emissions. So I'm honestly happy if someone else wins. I think there's really good people in clean tech. There's smarter people who work harder, and they work better together because you're doing it for a bigger mission.
I think the biggest competition in technologies like we're working on is just not changing anything, doing what we've been doing for the last 100 years, because it works. And like I said, it's also, it's not for me to say, oh, we shouldn't be able to build more buildings or build more schools. And so I think it's doing it in a way that's very respectful to the industrial giants on whose shoulders we're standing.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Bob Gatarma, and I'm the CEO of the China Project. We're an independent journalism platform focused on China. And I know a country that makes more chemicals and concrete than America, and there's only one, and it's China. And so I'm curious if you have any peer organizations or competitors or comps in China doing things like what you're doing, and whether working together with them would be discouraged, unfortunately, under the current geopolitical tensions that are happening, or whether there's still room to collaborate on these shared challenges.
I can answer that pretty simply, which is we're still making it work here in a culture and a language and electricity grid that we understand. And ultimately, we intend to scale globally. It's not just China, but Southeast Asia for the industries that we're operating in. But doing so, I presume will not have exactly the same circumstances as today, and proving it here first is pretty important, and probably the most capital efficient for us.
Yeah, I think there's challenges of scaling up in China, and it's not just the geopolitical reasons, it's the reasons behind those geopolitical reasons. And when we think of cement, of course, China produces more cement than the US by far, but actually India is set to exceed China's capacity for cement production by in the coming decades. And so they're the ones that are going to be building the most greenfield cement plants. So it makes sense to look more at the developing world than China.
Probably have time for one more.
I'm curious, we talked a lot about new technology.
Sorry, could you say your name?
Oh, sure. Tom Burnett, I'm with the John Templeton Foundation. We talked a lot about new technologies, the work that you were doing. I'm wondering, too, about old technologies that can be reimagined. I'm curious to ask you about what are some established technologies you think, man, if they could just be reimagined, rebranded, redeployed as if they were new, like put a new package around it and then sell it like it's brand new. If in your industries or others that you're aware of, like I'll give two examples. The bicycle has incredible potential. It was invented, the safety bicycle, in like 1880. And then, fission nuclear power since the 1950s. I think both of those, you invented them today, got a great marketing team, really sold the heck out of it. You could do great. So, can you give me some other examples where you think if people would just wake up and do this, it would be great? Probably not water wheels, but maybe some other things.
It'll be good for quick answers.
That's a tough question. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but I will say that in the industrial sector, there is a lot of low-hanging efficiency fruit. And the challenge there is capital, access to capital, and the ROIs that investors are looking for that to happen at an industrial facility. So I think that there's some reinventing to be done there that hasn't been solved yet.
That's super interesting. Very good question. I don't know if I have a quick answer, but I'd say like one of the problems that I'm most worried about outside of cement is soil. And I think we're depleting our soil very quickly, and I think that's a huge problem. It's a non-renewable resource. And so I think that composting, and I'm just gonna go on a limb and share one of my hobbies, which is worm composting. Worms eat 3 times their weight of food every day, and it's just such an efficient way of composting, way more efficient and better for the soil than just letting it rot passively over time. And that's something I wish someone could commercialize, but maybe after I'm done with cement.
Leah, Shreya, thank you so much. Thank you all.